tonight's horror is about witnessing that sometimes the most terrifying monsters are asleep. Imagine waking up one morning to find out that in the middle of the night, your body, not your mind, committed a horrific crime. You weren't angry, you weren't aware, you were just dreaming. In 1987, a Canadian man named Kenneth Parks drove 22 kilometers while asleep, broke into his in-laws' home and killed one of them, all while supposedly unconscious. What followed became one of the strangest trials in modern history, one that forced the world to ask, can someone really kill while sleepwalking? It was a warm spring night in Toronto. 23-year-old Kenneth Parks had fallen asleep on his living room sofa after watching Saturday Night Live. On the surface, Kenneth seemed like an ordinary young man, quiet, mild-mannered, newly married. But behind the calm exterior, his life was unraveling. He had developed a gambling addiction. Week after week, he lost money at horse races, sinking in debt. He'd even stolen from his employer to pay off what he owed. The theft was discovered. He was fired. His finances collapsed and his mental health spiraled. That night, Ken fell asleep troubled, planning to visit his in-laws the next morning to explain everything, maybe even ask for help. But before dawn, something unimaginable happened. At around 1:30 a.m., Kenneth's eyes opened, but he wasn't awake. He stood up, walked calmly to his car, got in, started the engine, and began to drive. He drove 22 kilometers down the highway to the home of his wife's parents, Barbara and Dennis Woods. When he arrived, he used his own key to unlock the door, walked inside, and committed an act so brutal that it would horrify the entire country. He attacked his in-laws, killing Barbara and severely injuring Dennis. Then, covered in blood, Kenneth got back into his car and drove straight to a police station. He stumbled inside, dazed and pale, and told officers, "I think I've just killed 2 people." When police examined him, they found deep cuts on his hand, but Kenneth felt no pain. He seemed confused, calm, and eerily detached. At first, detectives assumed it was a typical domestic homicide, but something didn't add up. Kenneth had no motive. He loved his in-laws. They had supported him even when he had lost his job. There was no history of violence, no argument, no reason. Even stranger, Kenneth couldn't remember anything about the night. Doctors examined him and discovered something rare. Kenneth had a long history of sleeping disorders, including night terrors and sleepwalking. His brain scans showed abnormal activity during deep sleep, consistent with parasomnia, a condition where parts of the brain are awake while others remain asleep. Kenneth's lawyers made a shocking claim. He wasn't conscious, he was just sleepwalking, they said. They argued that the crime was committed entirely during an episode of somnambulism, a state between deep sleep and wakefulness. It sounded absurd, but as the case unfolded, science began to back it up. To understand how such a thing could even be possible, you have to understand how sleep really works. Human sleep has two main phases: REM sleep, or the REM cycle, is when we dream, our eyes flicker beneath closed lids, our brain becomes active. NREM sleep, or deep non-rapid eye movement sleep cycle, when the body repairs itself and the mind quiets down. Sleepwalking happens during stage 3 of NREM sleep cycle, the deepest part of the cycle. In this state, most of the brain is off, but the parts controlling movement, like the cerebellum and brainstem, can remain active. That means someone can walk, talk, even drive without conscious awareness. Doctors testified that during sleepwalking, a person's eyes may not be open, but they aren't truly seeing. Their face looks blank, their heart rate and breathing slow. After waking, they remember nothing. It's as if the body becomes a puppet, acting on instinct while the mind sleeps. And this wasn't an isolated phenomenon. There were documented cases of people cooking meals, painting art, even driving cars while asleep. A British artist named Lee Hadwin famously created detailed paintings in his sleep, paintings he couldn't produce while awake. But Kenneth Parks' case was different. His actions weren't creative, they were deadly. Could a sleepwalker really perform something as complex and violent as murder? In 1988, Kenneth Parks stood trial for murder. The prosecution argued that he was fully awake, that he had snapped under stress and was faking his condition. But the defense presented expert neurologists, psychiatrists, and sleep researchers. They showed medical records and even showed family history, proving that Kenneth had long struggled with parasomnia. They also conducted sleep studies, observing his brain activity overnight. On several occasions, he displayed spontaneous episodes of partial arousal, walking and moving while technically asleep. Witnesses confirmed his history of sleepwalking since childhood. In a dramatic courtroom moment, one expert even testified that Kenneth Parks is not a killer. He is just a sleepwalker who found himself in a nightmare. After weeks of testimony, the jury reached a stunning verdict. Kenneth Parks was acquitted of both murder and attempted murder. The court ruled that his actions were non insane automatism, meaning his body acted automatically without control or conscious intent. It was the first case in Canadian history and one of the few in the world where sleepwalking was accepted as a full legal defense for homicide. The verdict sparked outrage and disbelief. How could someone kill and face no punishment? How could the law excuse a murder committed in sleep? But the neurologist argued that intent is everything. In criminal law, guilt requires both actus reus, the act, and mens rea, the guilty mind. Kenneth's mind wasn't guilty. It wasn't even awake. The case set a global precedent and ignited debates that still continue today. If the mind sleeps but the body kills, who's responsible? Even today, Kenneth Parks lives as a free man, though his life has been marked by trauma and guilt. He never denied what happened, only that he wasn't awake when it did. So, what really happens inside a sleepwalker's brain? In 2021, scientists discovered that sleepwalkers show reduced fight or flight responses during deep sleep, meaning they can move calmly even while performing dangerous actions. But even with all the knowledge, one truth remains. We still don't fully understand why some people sleepwalk and others kill. Kenneth's case wasn't the only one. In 1997, an American named Scott stabbed his wife 44 times, claiming he was sleepwalking. Unlike Parks, he was convicted. His careful attempts to hide evidence suggested consciousness. In India, 1957, a woman named Papati threw herself and her child into a well while sleepwalking. A case eventually led the Madras High Court to recognize sleepwalking as unsoundness of the mind. But not all stories end in court. Some sleepwalkers simply hurt themselves while walking off balconies or into traffic, never waking up until it's too late. In 2024, a 19-year-old boy in Mumbai died after sleepwalking off his sixth floor balcony. He didn't wake up either. Sleepwalking is a reminder that our brains are both powerful and terrifyingly fragile. At any moment, the delicate balance between consciousness and instinct can collapse, leaving us trapped between dream and reality. For Kenneth Parks, that collapse turned a quiet night's sleep into a waking nightmare. While you sleep, your body obeys ancient instincts buried deep in your mind, and sometimes those instincts don't stop at dreams. What do you think? Was Kenneth Parks truly innocent, or did he use sleepwalking as an excuse? Till then, sleep tight, and I'll see you next time.